Okay, hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the rollout of the Recovery Action Plan. We're going to take just a couple of seconds to go over a couple of housekeeping items as people get logged in here. This is a live webinar, of course, but we are recording it. So if you have fellow leaders in your community who would like to view this later on, each of our state programs will be sending it out later this week. And then throughout the webinar, we certainly encourage you to use the Q&A and chat functions, which you'll find in the control bar, which is very likely at the bottom of your screen. Please submit questions as they come to you. We'll be monitoring them throughout, and we do have a bit of time reserved at the end to address those with the panel. So as you're getting everything set up here, encourage you to use the grid option for viewing the 7 of us who are presenters today. This is a shared presentation, so we definitely want you to be able to see everybody. Alternatively, you can use a smaller screen to just view the speaker at any given time. So as I see people logging in, I think we're going to go ahead and officially kick this off. I'm Brianne. I'm the director of Washington Main Street. I'm joined by fellow Main Street leaders from Iowa and Oregon and a few local directors from Washington State as well. And we've been working over the last 3 weeks or maybe a little bit more on what we're calling a recovery action plan. And we set forth to do this because we keep saying Main Street is built for this. And there's so much that goes into that. There's 40 years of deep history of the Main Street approach through various economies in our country. There are thousands of people across the US who are dedicated to these existing organizations like the ones you represent. And there's just the spirit of innovation as well. And so it was really important to us as we started talking about this, that you all felt armed with the tools to really step up during this moment. And so what we've put together for you is, pardon me while I advance a slide here, we put together a flexible planning document. There are a lot of really great resources out there in the Main Street world and in economic development right now related to recovery, of course. A lot of them are being developed for businesses as they're addressing what a phased reopening approach looks like. And a lot of those have been led by states and counties, these great collaborative efforts that we're seeing pop up. There are also some really exciting national resources for Main Street programs through Reopen Main Street and the National Main Street Center. But the thing that we wanted to create was a document that you could take and use immediately, something that was designed for your organization so that you can feel really grounded in your plan in a way that will enable your organization to really be a leader through this, because we know how important your organizations are going to be moving forward, and we really want you to be able to say, this is our plan, we're moving forward with it. But as with everything with Main Street, it also needs to be really flexible, because all of your towns are different, all of your organizations and your capacities are different as well. So we have designed this as an Excel document that you can download and adapt at your will. It was developed through this partnership between Oregon, Washington, and Iowa. And with us today, we have the local executive directors who developed this plan. And that's the thing that we really feel like sets this apart. It was developed by local directors who know what's going on the ground and are using that, that great Main Street innovation to come up with some ideas, many of which you maybe have had already, but we hope that you'll add to this along the way, because it is that adaptable framework that you can take and use for your local needs. And so as you think about that, one of the things that the team really wanted to encourage everybody who plans to use the Recovery Action Plan, or the RAP, is that you really make a conscious effort as soon as you start looking at this document you as an executive directors and board leaders decide if this makes more sense as an overlay. For instance, if you already have a strong strategic plan and you're looking for variations to it for the next 6, 12, 18 months, as your focus is so much on economic recovery. Or maybe it becomes something that you use as your planning document and really take advantage of the framework and over time turn it into what you use as an organization as your planning tool ongoing. And you'll hear from the team throughout this presentation, and especially in the Q&A at the end, about how each of them view it, because those of the folks on this call who helped develop it are each viewing it in a different way as well. So I think that'll be helpful for you. So with that, I want to turn it over to Sherry Stewart with Oregon Main Street to give you a little bit more information about how this was developed and best of all, to introduce our team.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Sherry Stewart. I coordinate the statewide Oregon Main Street network. And thanks for that great introduction, Brianne. This has been a really exciting and fast-paced process that we've been involved in. It started about a month ago with a conversation that Brianne and I had with the National Main Street Center. We wanted to check in with them to make sure that what we were thinking as a flexible on-the-ground tool for our network communities wasn't something that they were already developing. And it wasn't. So we decided to move forward. And I think at that point, we reached out to Main Street, Iowa, because we knew that they had a lot of experience in disaster preparedness and recovery, because a lot of natural disasters that they had experienced, to see if they had any insights or any ways to inform the process. What came out with some of those discussions was the kickoff webinar, where we asked thought leaders from around the country and from the National Main Street Center and Main Street, Iowa, to be part of a webinar to really talk about their experiences and what they thought could really inform the recovery action plans for Main Street communities, both in our networks and across the country. Out of that, we formed the action team that you see listed right here. These really incredible executive directors who stepped forward and helped through this process, actually led through this process. Todd from the Olympia Downtown Alliance, Liz from Downtown Oregon City Association, Aaron from the Historic Downtown Chelan Association, Darren from Klamath Falls Downtown Association, and Deb with Woodbine Main Street. And then, of course, we had Carol, who is on staff with Main Street, Iowa, who really stepped up and guided us through this whole process. And we are so appreciative of her efforts. The team met a couple of times a week over the past 3 weeks or so to really develop the framework that you see and the content that will be introduced in terms of the framework. So it was really a fast-paced process, but as Brianne mentioned, what we really wanted to develop, not only the flexible tool, but something that came from the ground up instead of from the top down. We didn't want to be the ones that set the tone from the state perspective. We really wanted our local communities, and that's really what this team stepped up to do. And so they put a lot of time and effort, and we just so greatly appreciate their insight and their thoughts and their creativity and all that they give to develop this tool alongside with us. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Carol.
There we go. Yes, thank you. We had a great team, and I just want to echo that as well. Just been a great process, and you all have great resources within your states too, and I always appreciates being a part of it. So we're going to get into the user guide. We're going to start right now and talk how do you use this document, and how it's set up and how it's organized. First of all, just want to reiterate, please download the document and save it in a place that you can make your own, because we do have plenty of opportunities for you to turn this into something that you will use and edit and maintain throughout the course of this recovery process. So after you download the document, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to open it, and we really were obvious and said start here. So we have a start here page that really summarizes what the whole process is going to look like. Now, what we did for today's presentation is there's screenshots and just screen grabs of parts of the document, and we'll just kind of talk through those. And so you'll notice that when you open the document itself, it might look a little bit different just because there might be some expanded information, but certain information is going to be carried out throughout the document. So to reiterate what Brianne said, we wanted to make sure that we started with that Main Street recovery, that reminder, those couple sentences of why you're doing this, and just reminding you that yes, Main Street is designed. Your program was built to react to these kind of changes. So that's just a great way to start these discussions with your committee and your board, is to kind of review that paragraph, and then move down into how to use the document. And there's basically 4 steps to work through the document. And you'll notice with the tabs along the bottom, we're at the start here page. This is the only page that we have as a protected page. We just wanted to make sure that for those of you who sharing this document or sharing the video or being able to refer back to this page as kind of that reminder, oh yeah, that's what we're supposed to do on that tab, or that's the purpose of this. So this page is locked, but the rest of it is yours that you can make your own. So we'll move on to the next page, which is assess and evaluate. So typically what happens is in a disaster or in a time of duress within a community, we found in Iowa, people really want to take action. They want to go, they want to get started. We've had tornado, flood, recovery actions, and everybody wants to get started and get working. But really what you need to do is take that step back and assess the current situation on where you're at. And that's what this tab of the document is designed to help with. So, and just to kind of talk about how this rest of this presentation is going to go, I'm going to talk about the framework and the columns and the document itself, and then our directors are going to chime in a little bit, and they're going to talk about the content and really dig in. So I'm not going to talk a lot about content. I'm going to talk about the document and the columns. So starting with that first column is that point and purpose. And also for the purpose of this, I should have said this earlier, we have included the board in this document because we want all of your information to be in one concise place that you can refer back to. So although the board doesn't function like a typical committee, we do have it included in this in the framework of our document. So that back then to that first column, which is the point and purpose. The purpose of each of these committees is not that different, but it is different in the context of COVID-19. So we spent a little time developing a purpose statement for each of the committees and how they're going to react. And you'll see that carried throughout the document. That second column of the assess and evaluate, as you're looking at your current conditions, is what do we even need to look at? So there's 3 to 4 points for each or action or items under each of those 4 points. So what are we looking at? For example, that you see in front of you, the value of Main Street businesses to the business environment. So what do we, that's what we need to find out. So what are we going to do? That next column, how do we assess that? Well, what are we going to do? We're going to go out and we're going to ask the businesses. So we're surveying either through conversation, through an electronic survey, but we have some ideas on how you might look at doing those assessments, which brings us to the next column, which is actually tools that you might use. So we have identified certain tip sheets and ideas that are already out there. There's a lot of great information out there, and we didn't need to recreate the wheel, but we need to help and point you in the right direction to find that information. And that's what that column is for. And there are hyperlinks in that column that will take you directly to those tip sheets. So that I think you will find very useful. You can add again, you can add things as you find them in your local community and provide that information available for you locally. Which moves us to the next tab in the document, which is the adapt and the initiative and ideas. Yeah, thanks, Brianne, for advancing that. But I want again to reference carrying through certain things through the document. You'll see that we have again that point and purpose. That's how the tabs are organized, so you can quickly reference what you're supposed to be doing. You don't have to toggle back and forth between different pages, and it really will help keep committees and keep you focused when you're in that portion of the conversation. We've moved beyond point and purpose. You already have done your evaluation. You've created some ideas, and those initiatives go in that next column. Now, each of our participants and on our team really took some time and thought about initiatives and things that we thought every community could learn from. So there's some examples of initiatives in that we'll talk about a little bit further and taking that or further in the conversation. But then we also came up with some specific action ideas to help get the conversation started locally too. And again, we have a timeline of when those might be applicable to your community. Again, you're going to make this your own. What may be a near-term objective for you, another community, it may be a midterm objective. So that kind of sums up that page. And then we move into the actual, what I think is, again, where I think your volunteers and committees are going to be spending a lot of your time. And there is an individual work plan template for the board and for each of the committees. So this is where the action items really come into detail and where you really plan out what you're going to do. Again, we have the purpose statement there. It's just in a little different place. It's up at the top of the page rather than in that column, because we're carrying that initiative and action from the previous tab into this tab. So we identified in the adapt phase what we're going to do. Now we're carrying those items into this document, this part of the document, and the initiative and actions items. We take it into more detail. You see the next column, and that's kind of your to-do list. The champion is the person that's responsible to lead the action items and make sure that they get complete. So it's a project lead, a champion, a cheerleader, chair, whatever you call it locally, but really that's the intent of what that column is who's going to take that initial responsibility. The partner, again, is who's going to help make that happen. Your budget timeline, I'm not going to read all to you. You guys can see that in front of you, but I really want you to focus too on that last column, which is measuring success. One thing that we want to make sure that you do is build in assessment throughout the process, which kind of takes us to the last of the 4 points on that first page, which is to reassess and rework. You're going to mark critical checkpoints into your planning process at 3, 6, maybe 9, 12-month time period, because you're going to get caught up in the grind of the day-to-day, the moment of what you're working on. And if you get those checkpoints on your calendar now, you won't lose sight of the fact that you need to take another look comprehensively and holistically on what you need to be doing within your local community. So I'm going to turn it over to Erin, and she is going to take you a little bit into a deeper dive with some of the board items.
All right, thank you. Real quickly, I wanted to say thank you to Carol for her leadership and guidance through this whole process. You kept all of us moving in the same direction, and the amount of work that we got done was purely due to all of your effort in keeping us organized. It has been a really fun process working with these other Main Street directors and being able to brainstorm and talk through strategically. This process has been pretty phenomenal of what can be accomplished when we're all working together. So each of us was assigned a different area, 4 committees, and then I was assigned the board area. So I took a look at what is it from a board level and really the role of our boards to assess and evaluate. And really, I think we all work in this vein, but our boards are meant to be visionary and strategic. And we took an overlay of how does that apply from a COVID-19 lens what we should be looking at. It doesn't really change much what the board is doing from a strategic and visionary level, but at this point in time, we decided that during this assess and evaluate period, we should be looking at making sure that our mission, our core values, and our structure are aligned with what is our goal as Main Street organization helping our downtown business community. Partnerships is a huge area, and if this has not been a strong point, this is a great opportunity to start building those partnerships that can continue to strengthen our organization down the road. So taking a look at who are all the groups that as a board and as an organization we should be working with to strengthen our downtown business community. And then after the committees are done taking a look at what needs to be revised or assessed or evaluate, bringing those all the way back up to the board level, and from a strategic level, looking at are all of those work plan items necessary? Are they critical? Are they visionary and long term? So, and making sure that the budget we have matches those work plan items that may or may not need to be updated. So going on to our purpose and initiatives, we look at really what are those opportunities down the road, and how can we as an organization lead those recovery efforts that will affect and help our downtown businesses. So that first point, engaging partners, vital to the success of Main Street. So personally, even in our world, there were a couple areas where we didn't have partnerships, and over the course of the last 2.5 months have really created strong partnerships. So looking at people you work with, such as your local chambers, your port districts, your city, obviously, county, and then also in this whole process, it has been really wonderful connecting with other Main Streets that are neighboring Main Street groups, and working together to create sort of a common purpose and efforts moving forward. Another point, strengthening our financial support. So this isn't necessarily the time to be going out and obviously fundraising or anything like that, but this is a wonderful time to be reaching out to all of your past passionate supporters and ensuring that again, that partnership and that communication is solid, and just reinforcing that relationship and reinforcing the reason why those folks support your downtown. It's a great time. Also, you might find some new people coming out of the woodwork that when they see their downtown suffering, it's starting to bring out new people that may want to be part of the organization. And this is a great time to maybe find areas for them to engage in the organization. The third point around creating a culture of togetherness. So there's a quote that my son many years ago, when he was stepping on the pitcher's mound, and it was the last inning, 2 outs, tied game, and he just stepped up there and you could hear him whisper to himself, "It's time to shine." And that's exactly what I feel like these last 2.5 months have been like. This is what I feel like Main Street has been built for. It's our time to we have the roadmap, we have the structure from Main Street organization, but this is really our point in time as a board and as an organization to put all of these things that you'll hear the rest of the committees talk about, put those to work and show that it's our time to shine. It's our time to help our downtown businesses and really push them through this, and also make sure that our downtown communities are prepared for the next time something like this has happened. We're all kind of wading through this water of, we've never had to deal with something like this before, and hopefully we come out of this even stronger for the next time something like this might happen. Long range planning, really we should be looking at, I'm sure most of these other communities as well, as what I've noticed, is there's some holes in where our community wasn't prepared. Having an e-commerce platform was a big eye-opener for what our downtown was lacking. So that may be a long-range plan that hasn't necessarily been on our work plans before, but just an example of how, looking long-term, how are we going to create programs and efforts that help our downtown business community. And then just a couple sample action ideas. Taking a look at some of the partners that you might be working with. Is there a way to create joint messaging that is stronger together, that can help the community in ways to, like for us, it's bringing people back to town, but when can you do that safely? And so working with our chambers, we're working to create a message that is thoughtful but responsible. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there may be a point where you've got people coming out and reaching out, how can you support the downtown? Thinking about how do you engage those people? What are different projects that you might put them on if they want to contribute financially, making sure that they're recognized. This is an opportunity. The silver lining is you'll find people coming out that see your local downtown business community suffering and they want to help in some way. So be prepared, being prepared for how you take advantage of that, because these are people that will stick around after this is all said and done. So those are just some of the things that we worked on at the board level. And then each of the pillars have their drill down and kind of their COVID-19 overlay as well. So I'm going to hand that over then to Liz.
Hello. So I think design gets a bad rap in this post-disaster kind of time frame, because design projects tend to be our most expensive projects. And obviously when you're not bringing in revenue or fundraising, those are the first projects to go. I know my board cut out a whole bunch immediately. And so it's hard to look at design and see the same things. So when you're looking at what the design committee can be doing, you're assessing and evaluating just like every other group, but really you're looking at how people are using public and private spaces, and how you can make them safer for people to feel comfortable. Essentially, that's what design is making sure safety and healthy living is most important in our downtown. And so things that you can do to assess are, just taking an inventory of all of your businesses. A lot of the restaurants will have guidelines depending on your state that will restrict the number of spaces that they can use. What are the smaller businesses that need to maybe spill out into the street? Are you assessing? You also need to assess the city code type things that may restrict. We have a lot of smaller retail spaces that you could only have 1 or 2 people and still social distance in the store. So is there a way that you can bring the city into it and maybe spill out onto the sidewalk and have more open air kind of business? So looking at those three pillars for your assess and evaluate. And again, as Carol mentioned, this is all an iterative process. So, during phase 1, it might look very different than phase 2. And so looking at how you assess these things on a regular basis is important for how your community moves forward in that. So I can move on to the next. Yeah. So really it's the purpose is making sure your physical assets make your customers and your business owners feel comfortable in the community again. That's the primary goal. And with your promotions, you can tell people about it, but with the design, you can actually make it physically safe. So your initiatives have to kind of go around clean and safe measures, keeping social distancing, maybe looking at some of the sidewalks and figuring out if you can be 6 6 feet apart on smaller sidewalks? What does that look like? Many communities are starting to look into streeteries or parklets, or closing down side streets to have restaurants or retail spill out into those streets. So what can you look at, and what do your businesses and your property owners really need to assess in order to move forward, so that their customers feel comfortable again in downtown? I guess I can move on to the next portion. So some of those sample actions, some are longer term, some are changing city codes, but a lot are those smaller, really in small signage kind of, little projects that can make a huge difference. So working with the city to make sure that your A-frames are coded well, and that you can actually build out signs for how people can take out, or the new procedures for the safety measures for the community. Putting signs in windows to let them know that you're open, banners around the community, those kinds of things. And then again, you can talk about how businesses can maybe spill into the street. Street closures and parklets can be a good way for your community to bring in some revenue and maybe save some restaurants that might not be able to break even with the new guidelines in place. So just a few ideas there. And I think that the physical distancing specifically from COVID is a real opportunity for the design team to look at how public and private space is used. So those are just a couple of ideas. I guess I'll pass it along.
Good afternoon. So I'm Todd Cutts. I'm Executive Director of the Olympia Downtown Alliance. I am honored to be amongst this panel of executive directors and Main Street leaders. It's really been great to work with them. Really excited about this tool and what we're rolling out to you today. I think I'm most excited about the fact that I unmuted myself before I started talking. And none of us so far, I think that's really a testament to the quality of folks on this panel today. I want to make the point that's been made before, but kind of reinforce, this is an iterative tool. It's fluid, just like the situation we're in today. So as you're using it, as you're looking at it, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but pick and choose what works for you. And hopefully you'll find that to be true with the tool. I'll also say that, like the Main Street approach overall, there's interplay between these 4 points in between. Some of the things Liz talked about, I've got in economic vitality, so make sure you're coordinating between your committees as you're taking this on. So in terms of assess and evaluate the value of Main Street to the business community overall, it was mentioned in some of the intro slides. We're actually pushing a survey out to Friday morning to our stakeholders, to our small business community, to understand what the current market conditions are in our downtown. Really get a statistically valid, quantifiable look at what's going on, open up that hood and understand what the climate of our business community is. And I think with that tool, you can actually insert questions in there that can help you across the 4-point platform. So keeping that in mind. Most importantly, though, how do you provide value as an organization to those stakeholders? You shouldn't be flying your airplane without instruments. You want that data to help you guide those efforts and help you understand what your business community really needs for you during these times. Psyche of the community at large, so very similar. We have governors who are making decisions about when we can reopen our businesses. I know ours in Washington State may come Monday with some constraints around that. And so that's, one step that we're taking from a regulatory perspective. But what's the psyche of our customer base in our communities? Just because our governors are saying thou shalt reopen at this point, or you can, doesn't mean our customers are necessarily going to return. So where is our customer base? So asking our customer base and putting some questions out there, some surveys to help us understand how can we best serve our communities to make them feel comfortable coming back into our Main Street environments. Real estate profile. So unfortunately, I think we all understand at this point that we're going to lose some businesses in our Main Street environments. Let's start to wrap our head around what that looks like. I think with your stakeholder survey, you can get at that and ask pretty, direct questions around what's your plan? Are you going to be able to reopen your business and get that sense and start building that database? Liz mentioned local regulations from a design perspective. So really asking our businesses as well, and this could be in your survey tool as well, what's stifling your business during these times of COVID? Are there things that our cities can loosen up from a regulatory or a public right-of-way use perspective? So next, moving into the purpose and initiatives, talked about assessing and evaluating what the market conditions are, really creating that supportive environment. So as a Main Street organization, the way I think about it is we can assist our businesses within their four walls, but that's really their responsibility. But outside of those four walls, how do we help to create that supportive environment for our businesses, for our property owners? And how do we do so during this time with traditional economic development tools that are out there, but also new, creative, innovative approaches? We're in a innovative, creative moment in time where we have to really wrap our head around that because we haven't seen issues like this. Erin's talking about the next time something like this comes through. My head's exploding going, there's going to be a next time something like this comes through. But I think she's right. I mean, we have to be prepared for that. And I think Main Street is a good tool for that. So, when you look at that laundry list of high-level initiatives, when I'm looking at that, what I see is, some really project-based things. So, are there changes to the right-of-way, as Liz talked about? Are there changes to regulations? Can you take on policy, programs, projects that can help in that environment? Really also a role of communications, disseminating information, helping our businesses to connect with one another during this time, to help each other, to exchange ideas is something that we certainly as an organization are working on. We also, in that regard, want to leverage our community partners. So I know in the Olympia region, the Thurston County region, we've got really robust economic development partners that we're leveraging right now. Traditionally, we haven't done nuts and bolts business assistance as an organization. We've leaned on those partners and we continue to do so. Strengthening those partnerships right now is important. And helping our businesses to prepare for this environment to the best of our ability. So we put out a Smart Restart business support packet, which kind of gives some nuts and bolts about things to consider, checklists, that sort of thing for our businesses. So that's a lot in the near term. I think we're all struggling with everything feels near term right now, but it can't all happen right now. So again, emphasizing prioritizing some of these initiatives and action items. More in the midterm, thinking about strategically developing a plan for available space downtown as we transition from disaster response to recovery. There is an opportunity here to take a look at what our tenant mix is in our downtown and what we'd like our tenant mix to be as the economy, we hope, recovers in the months and years to come. We have an opportunity to really be thoughtful and strategic about our approach to bringing new tenants, new businesses in our downtown. From a long-term perspective, do Main Streets take a stronger role in really nuts and bolts tenant recruitment within our Main Street environments? Some of us have economic development professionals at our cities, at our counties, and working closely with them. And then the big idea would be a community development corporation, really mission driven, without the profit motive of a private sector developer to rehab our downtown environments. Next slide. So sample action items. So just a few kind of ideas to throw out there. Leveraging that organizational knowledge, again, the partnerships with our economic development organizations, gleaning from our stakeholder surveys what our businesses need right now. So can we do webinars, and a lot of us already are, with our stakeholders downtown about things like compliance to COVID regulations, e-commerce, social media. You know, one idea we've been talking about in my town is with the restrictions for our customers coming into our retail shops, do we want to have conversations about some retail or some reservation applications similar to what restaurants use these days, so our customers can understand they're going to be in the store alone or with a limited number of people and they have their time slot. New layouts for our stores is something, and the flow through our stores given social distancing regulations is something to take a look at as well. Liz touched on working with the city to increase our use of public right-of-way. So our sidewalks in Olympia, we're talking about relaxing those regulations and having those conversations with our city, pushing what would be the sidewalk into a de facto sidewalk out into the public right-of-way and closing a lane of traffic potentially to do that. And then the last kind of big idea would be considering something like a healthy business certification, a safe and well program, developing that checklist for your businesses to make sure that they're taking the measures that they need to take to the best of their ability to keep their in-store environment safe for their customers and make sure that it's a healthy environment. And self-certifying that they're doing so. And maybe then they get a window claim that they can put up on their window, certifying that we're one of those businesses that care about you, customer and community, and we're taking the steps we need to keep you safe. I think, again, with all these reinforcing, there's partnerships, with the different 4 points along here, that could be a partnership with promotions. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Hi, everybody. I'm Darren Rutledge. I am the Executive Director of the Klamath Falls Downtown Association in South Central Oregon. And again, I want to thank this team of panelists, not only for the terrific work we've achieved in a relatively short period of time, but also just because it's been a tremendous learning opportunity for me. So I hope it's useful to everybody else who's out there listening in. First of all, I want to address a question that some of you might be asking, which is, we're talking about organization and economic vitality and design, and we've got the 4 points, and then there's this kind of weird board one out there. And I think Aaron did a good job of kind of capturing the essence of why we've included that. It's, times like this kind of require some additional flexibility in the framework, if you will. And we felt that it's important for Main Street organizations across the country that there's a leadership body who's kind of looking over everything, because all of what we were used to working on in the days and weeks and months prior just kind of seemed to get toppled over. So that's kind of the juxtaposition there between board and organization. We think that they complement each other well. And again, just going back to kind of the flexibility of this tool overall, it allows different organizations at different points in their maturity to use the tool in whatever way works best for them. So wanted to address that real quick. As far as organization, this is addressing kind of the things that really need to be assessed, evaluated, and shored up, at least at some level, if we're going to execute on all the other things that we've been talking about. So again, as we go into this, a lot of it looks and feels like it overlaps with some of the work that the board would be looking at. But that's okay. We think that's good. So some of those areas that need to be evaluated are budget, obviously. Our funding sources have changed, maybe not the funding source themselves, but the size of those funding sources. If nothing else, their long-term sustainability is in question right now, so it's important we take a look at that. Staff and volunteer capacity, just the nature of Main Street organizations, especially young organizations across the country, probably one of the first questions that we were faced with was, are we going to have staff next month? And that's a pretty stark reality that a lot of us had to face. So it's important that we know what our actual human capacity looks like moving forward. Organizational agility, are we prepared to be able to deliver on some of these, in some cases, groundbreaking initiatives that we're trying to undertake? External positioning, are we just a group of volunteers that everybody thinks are nut jobs off in the corner trying to make downtown look pretty? Or are we really positioned to take a leadership role in revitalizing our districts? And then, of course, communication. Next slide, please. The purpose in this group, again, is around communicating to local elected officials and other leaders, whether that's business leaders, economic development leaders, whoever they may be, to make sure that they know the importance of our Main Street organization as a connector between small businesses and the support they need. Whether that's helping them find federal financial assistance, whether that's helping them source and deploy an e-commerce platform so that they can operate under limited capacity, whatever that might be. And then we want to make sure, you've heard partnerships a lot, and I would say that is an important concept in all of these areas. But at a high level organizationally, we want to make sure that we're strengthening and establishing partnerships to re-engage the community in revitalization. And I emphasize re-engage there. Depending on your organization, you might have had a ton of volunteer support from businesses, that kind of thing. Every organization in the country, whether it's a private business or a private nonprofit, is going through the same process we are. So it's important to reach back out to them and figure out how to get them re-engaged in the revitalization process. And then we can take a leadership role in leveraging financial and human capital. And sometimes that's not necessarily ours. Sometimes that's just making connections on those pieces. Some initiatives that we think make a lot of sense in terms of organization. And again, a lot of these this isn't revolutionary stuff. A lot of these you've probably already done. What we're attempting to do is capture this in one place so that you can address some of this stuff sort of intentionally and with focus versus just reacting to the next thing that's broken. So it's important to know your budget position, not only today, but what it might look like next month, what it might look like 6 months from now, certainly through the end of the year. Again, funding sources are changing, expenses are potentially changing, and if they're not, they're probably still being expended, so we need to make sure we have our hands around those things. A staffing and volunteer plan for the remainder of the year. Again, do we actually have someone that's going to answer the phone when it rings? Do we have volunteers on the design committee to work on some signage projects, those kinds of things? Prepare an executive summary of an assessment of the organizational ability overall. And again, in some of these areas, some of the initiatives we talk about sort of result in a very tangible output. In this case, again, because there's some overlap with some of the board functions, we want that to be, sort of an executive summary exercise that's put forward to that leadership body to consider moving forward. Position the organization to project confidence and competence in dealing with the COVID response. You've heard it a couple times today. It's what Main Streets were built for. But a lot of times, whether it's because our organization doesn't do a very good job of it or because nobody wants to listen to it, sometimes people don't realize we really are in a leadership role to take control of some of those things. So make sure that message is first and foremost in your communication. And then put communication tools and a team in place to make sure that the messaging is consistent, it's accurate, it's not too much. Again, remember, organizations like ours across the country are going through this same process. So when your electronic newsletter hits the mailbox, what is it that's going to make that person open the email and buy into to our goal? And then, of course, once the initial assessment's complete, just reassess over and over and over. And those intervals probably depend on your organization. They depend on the landscape in your particular area, but can't just do it once and file it away. It's got to be an iterative process so that, again, we're intentionally and proactively focused on the current state of affairs. So some sample actions or ideas. If you're not plugged into local task forces or economic recovery teams, that's absolutely the right place for Main Streets to be represented. Find out how to get plugged in there. We have unique capabilities. We have unique relationships. Sometimes, we have unique skills to offer to those bodies. So make sure that you're getting plugged into those. And then consider recruiting a volunteer team to execute on your communication plan. Depending on your organization's skills in that area, you might consider hiring that out if it makes sense. But again, the messaging and communication is important for this piece. So with that, unfortunately, Deb was not able to join us today, but you're going to be in good hands with Carol, who's going to talk a little bit about promotion.
Thanks, Karen. Yes, I am filling in for Deb. So she did a fantastic job along with the rest of the team. But really what we're going to start with promotion is, again, just like everything else with the assess and evaluate piece, you're going to be taking a look at your existing promotional calendar, which I'm sure you've all already started. We know that that's changed dramatically. What does it look like now? What is it going to look like tomorrow? And what needs to change? Same with the marketing materials that you already have in place, both your digital and your print. What is still accurate? And then how are you going to keep this information up to date and share it with the general public? So what are you saying about your downtown? The messaging is going to be changing a little bit. And then your experiences, the experience that people are going to have within your district or your downtown is going to change as well. And how do we start talking about those things? And how do we share that information? You've got your street level, and now we have a whole virtual element piece that 3 months ago would have been a very small part of a conversation is now a very large part of our conversation. So moving then to that next slide, purpose. Again, the purpose of the promotion committee is not changed that much. It's just changed in the context of COVID-19. You're still going to position your district as a center for activities, but now you're going to be centering it for virtual activities and street level activities. We're going to have to take innovative ideas to a new level, and how do we social distance but yet still bring people together from an event standpoint? How do we talk about those things and our comfort levels? We're talking about comfort level and being comfortable getting together in different ways, and that's going to be different in all of the different communities. So some initiatives that we talked about, and I presented ideas for you to consider. You're still going to market downtown as the place to be. You're still going to be positive messaging your downtown area and marketing for your individual businesses and sharing events and activities. But maybe they're going to be through a virtual connection instead. Maybe you're going to have virtual tours that are going to be walking tours or those types of things that then eventually can transition into small groups of doing activities together. Maximizing your digital footprint. How are you capitalizing on what your businesses are doing and helping them do that as well? How and when people can come together? Are you going to have a virtual girls' night out or girls' night in? Maybe it's Girls Night In and you're sharing information about what's happening in individual stores virtually. So there's a lot of different ideas and initiatives out there, and specific action items that can be taken. And kind of touched on that too a little bit with the ideas, but you're also going to want to be taking into consideration ways that you can help your businesses make money, and events that help your businesses and not only just bring people together. So I want to kind of relay back to something that Todd said, and kind of to sum up in the essence of time, kind of moving forward here. But the beauty of the template that we feel like that we've put forth for all of you is how you can see and track what's happening across your entire organization. Design and EV things work together, and then as your the street level activities in restaurants out on the sidewalk type thing, then promotions is going to message that. So all of these things are in this one place that you can share across your committees, and your volunteer bases can work together and see what's happening. And I think that hopefully that you'll find that this tool makes that easier for you to do as you take this plan and make it your own. So with that, I think it's time to turn things over to questions from you, because we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to address and find out ways that answer any questions that you might have. So please go ahead and either use the chat box or the Q&A box and let us know what you want to know. But I'm going to start off with a question for the team, because we've been pretty immersed in this process for the last 3 weeks. But I would like to hear from the local directors on how do you actually envision then now taking this and using this template within your local community. And I'll just start with Erin. What do you?
Sure. Yeah, I'll jump in. So I really love this template because it's an easy way that I can hand this, each pillar, I guess, off to my committee chairs. And we've been already working on some of these things just because I've been involved in this group. So over the next few weeks, it'd be great for my committee members and committee chairs to take their section and start digging into that, assess and evaluate. A lot of the things they've already been doing, because some of them were immediate and needed to happen. But then at our next board meeting, taking the full board through our assess and evaluate and just checking off piece by piece. Okay, have we done this? Have we missed something? And that's going to happen immediately. That assess and evaluate piece will be happening immediately within this next month.
Todd, how about you? You had mentioned you already have a survey going.
Sure. So for us, we have a robust strategic plan that we refresh on an annual basis. Everything is changing in this environment. I think we see it probably more as an overlay. None of us know how long this is going to go on, but I think there's a lot of validity to our kind of foundational strategic plan that we already have in place. But there is something that we need near term to ensure that we're serving the needs of our downtown community. So like Erin said, we'll be applying it at the community level and rolling it out for our board as well, and kind of creating that overlay plan that we use for however long this period is.
Well, yeah, and who knows? You're right. We don't know how long it'll last. But Liz, what do you think? What do you plan to do with this document first?
Sure. So our original 2020 plan, because we've been a very staff-heavy, activity-based organization, was to do a community engagement. And so I think we're going to take this plan and make it almost an underlay. So all of the activities that we have to do, we're going to prioritize things that can engage the community. And so we can still get our overall arching goal of becoming a more community-based organization, but still hit all of our goals for this recovery time.
Great. Darren, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think so. I think our organization will kind of use it as a sort of an exercise to make sure we haven't overlooked anything. I think many of us, maybe not so much now, but that first few weeks It probably felt like we were playing a game of whack-a-mole. Hopefully everybody knows what that is. Otherwise, I just am going to sound like a nut job. But we spent some time reacting to whatever needed to be reacted to. And with this tool, I think it's an opportunity for us to just pause for a minute, walk through it, and it's adaptable enough that there are some areas that we might just check off and say we're in good shape there. There are some areas where we might say, you know what, let's devote a little bit of resources to this and come up with a little more robust plan. So I think to me, that's going to be the value for our organization.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that immediate reaction is what a lot of communities have gone through, and now is the time to kind of take that step back and get to that assessment piece and figure out which pieces of this is going to be important. So we do have a couple of questions that have come in, and we really don't have a whole lot of time left. So I'm going to throw this one out there. And one of the questions from Michelle: what do you think about making pressure washing downtown sidewalks visible to the public, even though we are still in phase 1? I think phase 1 probably means different things to different communities based on where you are. But Liz, since design is kind of your area, what's your thoughts, or do you have any advice for Michelle?
Yeah, I say definitely go for it, because the earlier that you can get ready for whatever phase 2 looks like for your community, you want to welcome people into a clean and safe environment. And so I would say definitely do some cleaning. Now's a great time for that kind of stuff because you're not shooting water at people. But I think, I would say definitely go for it. Try to do some of those beautification things if you can.
Yeah, I think that really speaks to the question, speaks to the point of making this your own. It really is. This document is designed, if that's what your community feels like is a good thing to do, that's something that should be done. Another idea that came across is to write letters to your local newspaper and letters to the editor to kind of bring awareness and attention going on. So let's see, we have time for one more question, and I think we'll throw out the one that we had submitted to here. It is, do you feel that your Main Street work is fundamentally different during this time?
Yes. Sorry.
Todd.
I think the framework, it is well served. Again, really have to be flexible in what you're trying to do today, but we are all grasping at how do we operate within this environment, and it's nothing that's been seen for at least 100 years. So I think there's some psychology for us as directors too, to kind of breathe into, we have to be flexible. This is an iterative process. We don't have all the answers, but using that framework, going through the Main Street process can help us to get there.
Great. Well, Todd, I think you pretty much summed it up here. It's 2:00. So it's time to wrap things up. Brianne, Sherry, do you have anything that you want to add to close us out today? Again, I'd just like to thank you all for tuning in, and hopefully please report back to us and let us know how it's going and how this template is working for you. We're really anxious to hear how it works within your local community so we can also work to make it better as well.
Yeah, great point we wanted to make in this, Carol, is that, the thing that we are most excited about with this document is that it was developed by these 5 fantastic local directors, and we really hold them up as leaders in our 3 states. But we know that local executive directors and local Main Street programs and boards and volunteers have that competence to deal with this. And so I think, to use the other term that Darren referenced, and I want to say we're quoting Trip Muldrow on these, we want to give you the confidence as well. And I think a lot of times having a document that you are able to use, knowing that it came from folks like you, your neighbors, so to speak, you can adapt it as you like. It's an a la carte type of model. But take it and make it your own, because the work that you are already doing in our 3 states and across the nation is just incredibly inspiring. And we're just honored to be able to work on a little something that we hope will help you in your planning efforts over the next few months. Sherry, do you want to say anything before we wrap this up? Oh, unmute.
We almost got away with, darn. Oh, where's that bingo game that's going around? No, I just want to say I appreciate all of the effort once again. And I really appreciate the partnership that we've had at the state level too, between Washington and Iowa and Oregon as well. You know, we talk about developing your partners all the time. And so I'm glad that we were able to demonstrate what we preach through this partnership as well. And just again, applaud all of you all for being part of that effort. And we look forward to checking in with you in the future. And thanks to everyone who joined us for this webinar today. So.
Thanks, everybody. And if you didn't see it come out yesterday or you're watching this recorded, look for the Recovery Action Plan document from your state coordinator in the next couple of days. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.